Welcome to episode number 2, where we discuss all things AI, how to implement AI safely and effectively, and the breaking news in AI that's interesting. And today we're going to be talking about the new line of Apple Macs, specifically the MacBooks coming out with the M5, and what that means for local model processing, because they made some major jumps there. And we're going to talk about how there's a big flip in the app stores. ChatGPT has been number one on all the app stores basically for years now. And now Claude has overtaken them. Their number one spot on both iOS and Android. We're going to be talking a little bit on a secret project that OpenAI is apparently working on, if the rumors are true, that has to do with GitHub competitor. And that's going to potentially allow you to deploy projects onto the web directly from your chat interface, and additionally have a whole lot of things that unlocks for development teams. And we're also going to talk about some big news having to do with the Israel-Iran war, which affects me personally. I'm here in Israel, but I notice a lot of stuff happening on X, where there's been a lot of fake AI videos that a lot of pro-Iranian accounts, or apparently pro-Iranian accounts, or maybe they're engagement bots, we don't really know. That's what Nikita is claiming from X over there. But what's happening is that they are creating a lot of fake war footage that suggests that Israel is burning, which I can tell you is definitely not happening. And now we are going to jump into all of these stories, and there's a lot more coming up, and we'll go right through these, talk about the most interesting things, and go from there. So first, let's talk about the Apple event. So Apple has released the M5 Pro and the M5 Max, and these are going to be running on the new MacBooks. So I believe it's just there's no new Mac Mini yet. Apparently it's going to come out later in the year, but it is going to be on their MacBook Pro and MacBook Air models, which are coming out, I believe it's supposed to be coming out in March, although I'm not 100% sure on that. But either way, what they've done is they've made a big jump in how the tools, how the computers can process AI and process specifically local models. So if you're using local models, they're claiming that they are making a big breakthrough. And what exactly have they done? Well, they've actually broke the CPU and GPU apart into two separate chips and then reconnected them together. So there's two different chips that are then connected together, and the difference is that it can make big jumps in GPU. And so what that means is that they can have now 20 cores of GPU for the Pro, 40 cores for the Max, and that's going to be much, much bigger performance. So they're claiming that you're going to get 4 times faster AI performance versus the M4, which is an insane jump. It's almost 8 times as fast as the M1 models, which is just extraordinary. And so I've been using a Qwen 3.5 on my M1 Mac Mini, and it is insanely fast. If you use it directly through Ollama, it's actually not that quick, but if you use it with OpenClaw, it's insanely fast, and it's insanely effective, and it's totally free. Of course, you need to have a computer, but you don't pay for the cloud APIs. And if this is real, that they are now jumping up to these insane speeds, I would definitely consider upgrading. And what's so interesting is Apple, for a long time, people were saying that they were totally missing out on the AI war because they really haven't been developing their own AI. I mean, they have a few things on their smartphones that are basically not very good. I've never used them, but their hardware is the number one systems to run AI on, unless you're talking about getting, really big custom-built Windows machines. But for most consumers, you can buy a really strong Mac and you can run local models, and the local models keep getting better and better. So what does that mean for you practically? Well, it means that if you use AI for anything short of like deep data analysis with large data sets, or full end-to-end development of programs that you're deploying and selling, Anything short of that, you can fully run on a local machine without having to pay for OpenAI or Cloud or any of these other systems. And soon, it looks like you'll be able to also run potentially full program builds. I'm already building small apps myself. And again, this is with an M1 Mac Mini, but the difference is that the new local models are much more efficient and much faster and much smarter than they used to be. So bottom line, in the near future and really starting now, you're going to be able to do almost everything that you need to do. Again, short of running a full bigger company you're trying to build, you can do 100% locally. And that's just an extraordinarily large jump in what was possible, a year or two ago, let alone even a month ago, 2 months ago. So that's a big deal. Now, the story of Anthropic surging is super interesting because Claude has hit number 1 on the iOS and Google Play stores. And ChatGPT uninstalls surged by 295%. So what's going on here? Well, I don't know why this is happening. I don't think anyone exactly knows. They did make this commercial recently. I don't think that was the cause of it at all. But honestly, I think that Cloud is just outperforming. I think it's taken a long time for people to really use both systems and kind of settle in. The technology is still new, so people are kind of settling into the tool that they like. One thing is, ChatGPT, with every time they release a new version, it's like drastically different. And Cloud is like pretty consistent. I mean, the basic personality of the bot you're talking to is more or less not changing. It just feels like every release it's getting smarter and smarter. Whereas ChatGPT, they release a new version, and even if it's just moving from like 5.1 to 5.2, you go in and use it, and like the responses are wildly different. And I think that's one reason. And another thing is the Cloud Code and Cloud Cowork is just incredible. I mean, that doesn't affect the chat stores, but the app stores, but those are just amazing products that seem to be better than anything OpenAI has been releasing. I know a lot of people say 5.3 Codex is really incredible, but it seems like Cloud has just a more user-friendly interface from what I see if you're going to write code or if you're going to do co-work type system. But pretty interesting to see Cloud overtaking ChatGPT. I feel like the field is still very much wide open for which ones are going to be the dominant chatbots. It could even be one that we don't know about currently. Okay, moving right on. Now let's talk about the Department of War in the US. So big deal. So basically, if you don't know a little bit about what happened, so Anthropic was essentially, honestly, the story is a bit confusing. I'll try to do the best I can to summarize it, but I haven't been able to follow all of it. But either way, I'll point out some of the interesting parts. And if you want to do more research, there's a lot of people on X I'm sure you can find. But the short of it is that Anthropic was being told by Pete Hegseth and the Department of War that they needed to not restrict what the Department of War could do with Anthropic's system. And the argument is basically like, we can't be calling you and asking you if there's an immediate emergency event that you are locking us out of using your AI system for because of your terms of use. And essentially the long and short is that they didn't agree with that they wanted to have a lot of restrictions with how the Department of War would use them. And now Sam Altman swooped in right after, a couple days after it was announced that Anthropic would not be being used by the Department of War anymore. He swooped in and made a deal with them, and now they're going to use OpenAI. And it seems like this ruffled a lot of feathers in the company. He's had to give a whole statement to his employees. That got leaked to the press. Now he's kind of backtracking and saying another thing on X, and people are pointing out there's some contradictions here. So super interesting story. What exactly is going on here, and how is it going to develop, and what is even happening here? Let me know in the comments if you understand more about what the debate even is, because a lot of people were really confused about like what exactly is the issue, because it seems that OpenAI also didn't agree with certain things like mass surveillance and stuff, but I guess they didn't force the terms to align with the way they wanted. They just had some sort of informal understanding about certain things. It's a very confusing story, but I think the main takeaway is that these two companies keep battling it out, and that we will start to see a whole lot of interesting stuff coming out with how the governments are using these AI models in terms of privacy, data collection, surveillance, war, and how that's going to be managed when you have these companies that have so much power creating this technology that can be used for war and surveillance and things. Who's ultimately going to decide how these things happen? In a way, the balance of powers have shifted where these private companies have so much power, but the government's going to tell them how to use it to an extent. Now, let's move on to some interesting thing that has happened with the AI war videos. So there was a lot of talk on X. I saw this personally because I'm following the war very closely because I'm living in the war in some ways, although Iran is getting a lot worse than Israel is. But I do have sirens and things going off, and I am in the realm of action, so to speak. So now what I noticed on X is that people were claiming, it just came up on my feed, that Israel was burning, that people were fleeing Israel. There was videos showing total chaos, everything on fire, missiles hitting, dozens of missiles one after the other, striking down direct hits in Tel Aviv. And I knew that none of this is true. And what would happen is then you'd see people in the comments saying, @Grok, please verify. And Grok would come back and say, this is true. But I noticed what Grok was doing was it would do a simple cross-reference with news. So it would see, okay, the video seems to show missiles hitting Tel Aviv. I'm going to cross-reference the news. Indeed, missiles have hit Tel Aviv. Even though the reality is that, one missile hit, I think, Petach Tikva, which is next to Tel Aviv, which wasn't even a direct hit. It was shrapnel. One missile hit, and also again shrapnel hit Bnei Barak, I believe, which is next to Tel Aviv. So then there was a direct hit in Beit Shemesh, if I remember correctly. I know there was a big event there that unfortunately killed several people, and I believe, if I remember correctly, it was a direct hit. So Grok looks at these things and says, yes, there is indeed news about direct hits and shrapnel falling and different things, and so the video is right. Even though the video itself is clearly fake, and you can see that it's fake looking at it. But all these people were now trusting this information because Grok was verifying it. So now what happened, though, is that Nikita Beer, however you pronounce his name, who is the head of product at X and is essentially the spokesperson now for the X product on the X platform, if that makes sense. He's on the X platform. He himself posts about the X product to update everybody what's going on. And he said that they're going to ban revenue sharing for anybody who shares a AI-generated video of an armed conflict without adding a disclosure that it's made with AI. And he claims that it's not so much a case of pro-Iranian channels or pro-jihad channels or anti-Israel channels or whatever these channels are, but it was that they're trying to game the revenue sharing. So they're making maximum engagement posts. And here's a direct quote from one of his posts on X. He says, last night we found a guy in Pakistan that was managing 31 accounts posting AI war videos. All were hacked and the usernames were changed on February 27th to Iran War Monitor or some derivative. So that was just one example that he raised about the issue. So pretty interesting issue, just another update there. So now let's see some other things that I wanted to talk about. So another thing that happened is Google Gemini released a new model, which is the, let me see if I can get this right, Flash 3.1 Lite preview. And what's really impressive now, Gemini, I've been a big fan of Gemini for practical use recently, even though I have switched to local models, but previously I was using Gemini basically because it's very cheap, it's very fast, and it's just about almost as good as the best ChatGPT and Anthropic models. That's been my experience, and the benchmarks confirm that. Now, the new benchmark actually looks like it's very, very strong. So, for example, it is essentially matching or close to matching GPT 5.2 on several real-world benchmarks, and it's about 10% as slow or 10 times as fast. So 10 times as fast, and it's just about as good. So in real-world performance, it's gonna feel just as good, 10 times as fast, and it's about 1/7 as expensive. So really incredible value there. And it seems like Gemini's play right now is to release fast, cheap models and basically making things as user-friendly as possible for the cost. And they're doing a great job of that. And we'll see how these wars continue to develop. I mean, those are really the big three when it comes to the dominant models is OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google. Now, something kind of funny and interesting, ChatGPT is bragging about their 5.3 instant response and how much better it is than 5.2 instant. And the example they use, they show a side-by-side comparison of what happens when you write, "Why can't I find love in San Francisco?" And this X user @HenryNoon_ makes an interesting comment. "I can't tell if this is OpenAI being so insanely out of touch with 99% of America, or whether it's so dialed into their target audience of socially awkward nerds that they've actually nailed it." It's interesting. I mean, it's like Anthropic has generally been really pushing that they are a work product, and ChatGPT is like, we are a product for the masses. And there's a lot of buzz around ChatGPT of Gen Z using them, of people using it as a therapist, a dating coach, et cetera, et cetera. So, I think they are in many ways dialed into their target audience. But either way, currently Claude is overtaking them not only in the work performance, but also on the app stores. So pretty interesting just to keep an eye on how these develop. Let's see if I have any other stories. Now, GitHub. So for those of you that don't know, GitHub is essentially, you can think of it as like the Google Docs for software code. And what it means is that you can post essentially all your code on GitHub. It lives online. You can share it. It can be accessible to other people. You can share it give write access to, WRITE access to other people in your company or collaborators, whatever, and they can write changes, and it stores version history. So anybody who's managing projects with development can essentially restore versions if they overwrite something that wasn't a smart thing to do. And it's basically like the central place for managing your deployments of your product. So what OpenAI is doing is they had an issue where GitHub went down for a little while, and they thought, hey, what if we create a GitHub competitor? And so this is super interesting because OpenAI potentially could be connected to this GitHub competitor, and then if you're coding through OpenAI anyway, you could just have OpenAI deploy and manage all your deployments and versions, everything with this GitHub competitor. Also, because they're partially owned by Microsoft, Microsoft has a huge stake in them, and they're closely embedded with Microsoft technology. This could be a really interesting competitor for GitHub. And it's just part of potentially building out a whole infrastructure for managing projects end to end in the future, including big development projects, proper companies, proper software. Let's see if there's anything else, any other news or topics you want to discuss. Here's a tiny little tip from a user called Nox, Knox on X, and unfortunately I didn't write his full username down. Hopefully you can find it if you want. If you're doing AI videos, so he says before you post them to put them in CapCut and add 2 to 3% film grain. Add a light background noise layer like coffee shop or street, because the AI voices and AI audio tends to have this unnatural clean sounding. Export at 1080p for better blending, and do 1 round of Telegram compression. Basically upload to Telegram and then download. And I come from this world of video. I know video really well. Yeah, this makes a lot of sense. The AI videos, they come out too clean and too crisp. So this makes a lot of sense to try this out. Apply the film grain in CapCut, add some background noise, export at 1080p, and add compression. I mean, this is a nice little hack. Upgrade it to Telegram and downgrade it again. Honestly, if you just post it on YouTube or X, they're already going to add that compression, but from his experience, this is a good intermediary step, and probably that's a good idea. So I thought that was pretty cool. And I want to end by just saying, encouraging everybody, try out local models. They're just incredible. And you don't even need the M5. I mean, the most expensive M5s, you don't need those. You can buy a M1 Mac Mini like I have, and you can run Qwen or Qwen 3.5 on there, and it can work so well, and it's free and it's fast, and I'm just loving it. So definitely try out local models. That's going to be where I end it. All right, I don't know when the next time I'm going to do this is. Could be a week, could be 2 weeks, but if people start liking these, if they start getting traction, we're going to roll them out more and more. So stay tuned for that.